Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. The Swim Brief is brought to you by my employer, Jersey Wahoos, who over the weekend we swam our long course Middle Atlantic, that's our LSC senior championships, and we won. So congrats to us. We had a really good team effort on both the men's and women's side. One of the things that I think was really great, we had 47 swimmers at the meet, and those swimmers were not just from our national squad, which is our highest end in terms of competitive scale on the team, but we had some people from our Horizon 1, that's our top age group, and we had a few swimmers from what was known as the high school squad that I coached this year. Is going to be senior squad going forward, who came and they qualified for the meet pretty late in the game. Showed up, did personal bests. So a really nice team effort here by the Wahoos, and we're really proud of that. So I want to talk about three things today on the podcast. I'm going to talk first up about the biggest news story of the last week, which is Michael Andrews' comments on not getting a vaccine. I want to briefly touch on Sha'Carri Richardson being left off the Olympic team and some of the discussion I've heard around that. And then finally at the end, I want to talk about there being no spectators at the Olympics in Tokyo. So let's get to the big one, the one that has spawned at the time of recording of this podcast something like 800 comments on SwimSwam, which we'll get to later. Michael Andrew in the U.S. Olympic swim team presser this past week revealed that he's not gotten a COVID vaccine. And his stated reason for not doing that was that he was worried about, some of the very normal adverse side effects that people have gotten. I've known people that have gotten a vaccine and just not felt very good for a couple days. That seems to be a pretty normal reaction. Some people are fine. He didn't want to miss crucial days of training heading up to the Olympic trials. Okay. However, this obviously gets into a big politically charged debate because just like almost everything else in America right now, the fault lines are instead of eroding away, they are actually deepening, and so we're getting sort of one camp that's like vaccines are good, you're Hitler if you don't get a vaccine, and then which is I think is overstating the point, and then we have the vaccines are bad, you should absolutely not get one. Okay. The truth of the matter is, while I don't agree with Michael Andrews' decision to not get a vaccine, I think he should have gotten a vaccine. I think he should have gotten one because for a number of reasons. One would be if you just address the logic of his argument. He said he already had gotten COVID, so he had some belief that he still had some immunity from that time getting COVID, and therefore didn't see a lot of benefit from getting a vaccine. Now, I think he would benefit a lot, especially since he's traveling to a country with, as we'll talk about in our last topic, has relatively low vaccination rates. I think the risk of him getting COVID again before the Olympics is way bigger than the risk of not feeling great for a couple days at most after getting a vaccine. So right now it's a little late probably to have a few days where you don't feel well, but he was out in California. I think he probably could have gotten a vaccine all the way back in April, and that probably would have helped him a lot. I think it would have protected him against some of the exact sort of stated stuff that he is worrying about. The second thing is, and I think that this just goes to sort of general perceptions about vaccines, is it is somewhat of a selfish decision in terms of he's put his teammates and his coaches in a really bad position on this Olympic team. I heard a lot of people bandying about Dave Durden's quote, because he had to respond to it. And I'm not going to read it because he almost really said very little. And I don't blame him for doing this. I mean, there is no benefit to Dave Durden wading into this. He really he definitely does not want to answer questions about whether or not Michael Andrews gotten a vaccine, because it's a no-win situation for him. So he's put the coaches on his team in a no-win situation, teammates having to respond to this in an absolute no-win situation. And then so in terms of greater society, we're trying to get up to a percentage so that we can have herd immunity and move on with our lives. And here's a person who has a lot of fans. I'm one of them. And he could do a lot of good by having gotten a vaccine and talking about having done it and why. And he didn't do that. So that part of it, I think my opinions are pretty clear. Now we get to the second half of this, and I just want to use this as another instance to talk about how toxic SwimSwam's comment section and the sort of lack of moderation. I know that they will say that they moderate comments, but the fact of the matter is, on any number of articles, people are allowed to go on there anonymously, say horrible things about people, and that information, it's very hard for our brains to filter that from the news part of what we're reading. We have a tendency to remember it, and we can't help that. I think a better way of viewing SwimSwam than a news organization, because it's not really a news organization. Occasionally, they, and I've talked about it on this podcast. Occasionally, they do actually do news. They actually, make a solid attempt to report on something and do a bit of journalism. But a better way to think about it is really like a curated social media news feed. It's very similar to a news feed. And what they're trying to give you, like any social media news feed, is the stuff that will keep you on the page, that will keep you coming back to the page. And the comments are highly addictive. I know, because I love them too. And when I say I love them, I don't mean that I love them, they're great. I mean, I always want to look at the comments. Okay? I was so upset when Megan Esting got fired from SwimMag. Guess what? I read every single awful comment on that article. Okay? So even though I'm telling you the comments are awful, I will admit that I read them, and most people I know read them. So in essence, SwimSwam is giving me what I want. However, that does not mean that they should do it. Okay? We have all sorts of things in our society that people might want, but we put restrictions around giving it to them, right? Okay? A drug addict might want crystal meth. It doesn't mean that we should just give them crystal meth, okay? And I do think that these comment sections are toxic. They are not good. They're not good no matter what side of something you're on. They're not good for you. And I really wish SwimSwam would either build the infrastructure to properly moderate them, or do away with them altogether. They won't. They won't because their business model is built on the traffic that is driven by comment sections. Okay, and so basically they're like, they're like a drug kingpin. They're like, you're asking a drug kingpin, like, hey, I know you're making a lot of money selling crystal meth, but do you think maybe you could cut that out, and make no money? Do something else honest? That's how I feel that request is going to be written to them, but I still think that they could do a lot of good by either put in a comment moderation system that at the very least requires people to reveal their true identity. I mean, because look, I put some criticisms of Michael Andrew here, and but what differentiates me from what's going on in the Swim Swam comment section is here you can see my face, you can hear my voice, you know who I am, you know where I work. Okay, I have to stand on the things that I'm saying, right? And that in a certain sense moderates my commentary, because I can't just make wild. I can't say Michael Andrew is an evil fascist, right? I can't say that. One, because it's not true, but second, because I have to be accountable for what I'm saying, and there's no accountability right now in a Swim Swam comment section. Okay, we talked that topic to death. Let's talk about Sha'Carri Richardson being left off the Olympic team. So the sequence of events here, as I will report them as a casual track follower, is Sha'Carri Richardson. She's got this beautiful dyed hair. She runs really fast at USA track trials and qualifies for the team. She's young. People are enamored with her. She's got she comes across really, really well on screen. She's poised to be this big Olympic star. And I'm going to tell the story as she's reported it. She is apparently estranged from her birth mother. Okay, that is the woman who gave birth to her. And she found out at Olympic trials via a reporter's question that her birth mother had passed away. Okay, and she said she was really upset by this. That is totally legitimate. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to, first off, be that disconnected from the person who gave birth to you. I mean, that brings its own sort of emotional weight. And then to find out that person has passed away as you're trying to manage all these other things, interview, that's it. So she said, of course, this put her into an emotional tailspin. She turned to cannabis as a way of coping with that. As a result of that, she was tested in competition. She tested positive for THC, and she was given a 1-month ban. Okay, and that 1-month ban meant that at best she would be eligible to run on a relay in Tokyo. She would miss the individual event that she had qualified for. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about this on the front end. Is this why? I think there's been a tremendous amount of liberalization around cannabis in the United States, right? You've seen states. I live in New Jersey. New Jersey passed a voter referendum legalizing cannabis. There's a lot of other states now in the U.S. who have passed a similar resolution. There are states where they've got stores set up and they're selling. So legalization has come a long way, and sports has mirrored this in a way, right? At a certain point, cannabis and THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, was sort of on par with a lot of performance-enhancing drugs in terms of the penalties should you test positive for it, and that's been gradually peeled back. I mean, actually, the only reason she had any sanction at all was that she tested positive in competition. Okay, that's not, you're not breaking the doping rules if you test positive for THC out of competition, in one of these random out of competition tests. So there is still some discussion about whether it's a performance enhancer in competition, especially in some of these sports that, THC is meant to have some sort of calming effect. So some sports like, pistol shooting or archery or whatever, there's some legitimate conversation happening about whether it is a performance-enhancing drug in those contexts. I ultimately fall down on the side of it should not be a drug that you get sanctioned for. I don't think people are using it for performance-enhancing benefits, and I don't think that it really net gets you performance enhancement. That there's definitely probably some advantages to it, as I understand the science, but there's also some performance disadvantages that go along with it. But all that said, those were the rules. In the competition she was entered, she broke the rules. So she deserves the sanction. And honestly, it was a very light sanction of 1 month. So, I think it's unfortunate, right, that it happened. But it's certainly justified. And the USA Track and Field are certainly justified in leaving somebody off who, using their discretion to leave somebody off who broke the rules at Olympic trials. Because, it's actually pretty risky for them to take somebody and then, should another incident crop up at the Olympics, sort of be without. That really threatens some of their competitive chancing. It's a judgment call, and I can't argue with them for making that judgment call. Okay, let's talk about Tokyo, no spectators. My brother-in-law lives in Tokyo, and as with everything else during COVID, it's been on a bit of a roller coaster. Been really interesting to follow. I think Japan is a country that has always seemed to have some advantages going through this COVID period. They have, in general, really high levels of hygiene, and people are used to wearing masks when there's respiratory illness going around. So Japan has never had a massive outbreak like we've had in the U.S. At the same time, they've been very cautious throughout this. And when it seemed like there were going to be spectators, but only if you already lived in Japan, my brother-in-law was pretty excited because he thought, well, I'm already here, so it's going to be easy for me to get into the venues and I can go watch some Olympics. So he's pretty sad. I think it's sad for the people that are competing, that they're not going to be able to have that sort of fan reaction to what's going on as the competition unfolds, and that's just a fact of the matter. And I think we have to balance some of this with the fact that the Olympics is, whether we like it or not, especially in the sport of swimming, it's a really, really big deal. We've already postponed it a year, and on some level, I'm very, very grateful that it's happening at all. Okay, and whatever conditions that the host country feels like they need to enforce to have a safe competition that protects the citizenry of their country, that protects the athletes and coaches from other countries that are involved in it, I find myself in agreement with it. So it's a tough break, but I think that it's for the best, and it doesn't do too much to temper my excitement for watching these races. It's going to be a little weird. I watched some NBA last year with no fans. I still very much enjoyed watching it. There's going to be some advantages for the athletes in terms of, typically Olympic venues are super crowded, and there's traffic, and there's all sorts of other things going on. I think that stuff's going to be minimized because of the lack. So it's not a straight bummer piece of news. It's not great, but life will go on. Anyway, thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks for subscribing and tuning in and telling a friend. Thanks to everybody who watched that horrible video about David Popovich with the very, very choppy video. If you'd like to send me money to get a MacBook Pro, you just reach out via my website. And until then, I'll talk to you next week.